Hello and welcome to our Degrees of Debt Rally. Thanks to the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh for hosting this event, and thanks for joining us here this evening. I'm Noelle Dickman, a journalist for USA Today Network Wisconsin that covers education, and coincidentally, I'm still paying for my own education. This event is being carried live on the northwestern.com and across the USA Today Network Wisconsin, and it will be available for replays. We also want to acknowledge the Wisconsin National Guard, which is underwriting the Degrees of Debt series. A representative from the Guard is available to answer questions about their tuition assistance programs. Degrees of Debt is designed to do three things. The first is to let our readers know about the seriousness of student debt. Later this year, we will explore how candidates for office say that they'll address student debt and college affordability. And next year, we'll be writing about ways students and families can make smart decisions about higher education. There's more than $1.3 trillion of student debt in the country. The federal government owns or backs more than 90% of the debt, but many recent graduates have fallen behind on their payments. This next slide shows where Wisconsin ranks in percentage of students graduating with debt. On average, it's about $29,000. I've been sharing my own number on videos in the series, which is $45,000 after graduating from here, UW-Oshkosh, and I had another semester at a private college. I didn't share my experience with debt as an overachiever to impress anybody. I did it to foster a conversation around the second aim of our series, which is to provide information to students and families. There are many factors behind the increase in student debt, and one of them is the amount of state financial support per student is declining. This is happening in Wisconsin and across the country. As you can see from these two slides, state support has not kept up with tuition increases. From 2009 to 2015, tuition increased 17%, but state funding per student fell by 15%. UW system graduates are also finding it harder to keep up with loan payments. About 1 in 20 default, which means they miss payments for at least 9 months. Default rates are even higher for Wisconsin Technical College graduates. High levels of student debt are making it harder for young people to buy homes, go on vacations, or leave their parents' basements. But here at UW-Oshkosh, you win some and you lose some. On average, you have less unmet financial need than students at other UW schools, but you graduate with more debt, such as in my case. In addition to 4 campus rallies this fall, early next year we'll be holding a series of college info nights to help middle school and high school students and their families make smart decisions about higher education. We'll be having one here in Oshkosh on Tuesday, February 7th at the Best Western. Now, the final goal of Degrees of Debt is why we're here tonight. We've been asked why we are describing these events as rallies instead of a town hall or a forum. So not to get too grammatical on you or anything, but we're using the word rally as a verb, not a noun. We want to bring energy and a sense of urgency to the discussion. So what's our common purpose and our cause to rally around? So talk about solutions to make college more affordable and accessible. To that end, we've invited some smart people up here on stage to share their knowledge, experiences, and ideas. And we're going to start with some questions with our panel and then take questions from the audience. We're joined by Chancellor Andrew Levitt, who's the 11th Chancellor here. Austin Booth, President of the Oshkosh Student Association, and who has done lobbying in Madison and DC about student debt and workforce readiness. We're joined by Kevin Cathy Jr., President of the Black Student Union and Research Coordinator for UWO's Division of Academic Support of Inclusive Excellence. And John Dudzinski, a recent graduate of UWO who now works as a financial advisor. So John, let's start with a question for you. You've been out in the real world for several years now. What advice do you have for students as they try to fit figuring out how to pay for college into everything else that they have going on?
So one of the key things that I think perhaps, I don't know if it's a misconception, but it's just become standard, is the idea that it's going to take more than 4 years to get out of school. When I looked at college, when I kind of crunched the numbers and I thought, how am I going to make this work? It became abundantly clear that the most expensive part of college is, one, it's the opportunity cost. If you spend a year in college, that's a year you're not earning a full-time wage, presumably, and there's also the living expenses, if you have that part of the component as well. So if you end up taking 5 years to get what is traditionally a 4-year degree, that is far and away the quickest way to start making this whole experience cost a lot more. So when you're trying to figure out how to make this work, the cheapest way to get through this experience is to get out quickly. There seems to be this idea that it can't be done. I don't know, among my friends, that really wasn't the case, so long as you knew what you wanted to do somewhat early in your career. I switched majors twice and graduated in 4 years with 150 credits and 2 degrees, so it didn't seem impossible. That would be my biggest piece of advice is plan it out ahead of time, know what you're going for, keep your nose to the grindstone, and get out in 4 years.
Okay. You mentioned your friends. How much of an issue is student debt with your friends and your fellow young professionals? Like, how much is the debt an issue for you?
It's certainly something we're cognizant of. I mean, the statistics are pretty clear. The amount of debt we have now is higher than it used to be. But the other caveat to that is that the wage differential between someone with a degree and someone without one is also higher than it's ever been. It's about $20,000 a year. And so the average wage difference, so it's about $1,700 a month. Our average loan payment is right around $300 a month. So certainly student debt is an issue, but we net out there about $1,400 a month to the positive. So it's an issue, and I suppose, you know, I'd rather not pay it off. But $1,400 a month to the positive isn't half bad when you start out your career.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you. Now a question for Chancellor Levitt. Chancellor, many of the numbers that we've been sharing are state and national averages for all colleges and universities. So what's distinct about UW-Oshkosh and the issues that are facing its student body?
Well, thank you. First of all, thanks for putting on this very important forum. This is really an important issue for students and their families, and certainly needs to be addressed. So I'm delighted to be here. Well, you know, here at UW-Oshkosh, we have an average debt load of about 73% of our students end up taking out student loans and graduating with debt. And our average is a little bit higher than what the system average is. And our time to degree is a little higher than the system average is. And so to really sort of expound on what John was talking about, it's the time to degree is really a major culprit in terms of driving up the cost of higher education. The fewer calendar months you are in school, consecutive calendar months, the cheaper it's going to be. And one of the reasons is that it's your cost, your living expenses. If you look at what you pay for tuition and fees and books, and then you look at what you pay for personal expenses and living expenses, you add all of that up, that's called the cost of attendance for any institution, and every institution out there has one associated. Ours is about $19,000 a year. It may surprise people to know that only $7,600 of that $19,000 is comprised of tuition and fees. And you add another $1,000 on for books, then you have $2,800 for personal expenses and $7,600 for living expenses. So 45% of that $19,000, I know there's a lot of numbers here, are attributable things in the classroom. That's tuition, fees, and books. If you look at the other 55%, personal expenses and living expenses, those are things that you pay for even if you're not in school. So interestingly enough, what I like to say is we're one of the few industries, if not the only industry out there, where the cost of living is factored into the cost of our product. So I want you to imagine going and buying a car from a local dealership and looking at the sticker price on the window, and it says $23,000 for the car, but then it also says rent and cell phone and food and all those other things, and it adds up to a much, much bigger sticker price. And so when we look at the cost of educating an individual in this country, we always factor in personal expenses and also the cost of living. And so it's a complex issue as a result. At UW-Oshkosh, I'm concerned. I'm worried because I do think our students graduate with too much debt. We're working very hard in terms of of trying to make college more affordable. And sort of end my thought here, there are 5 elements to affordability that we talk about at the UW system. The first, of course, is tuition. Tuition has been frozen for the last four years. It's going to be frozen for at least 1 more year. We have the state subsidy, which Noelle, you brought up. It certainly has been in decline over the years. We have financial aid, and that's grants, scholarships, and loans, and that's where students end up negotiating trying to whittle down the costs through that avenue. Then you have time to degree, we've already discussed, and then finally cost to educate, and that's on the institution itself. We have to do what we can to hold down the costs of what it takes to educate a student. And I think we've done an excellent job. I'd be happy later to look at some of the slides that were shown before to demonstrate how actually the cost to educate a student has not changed that much over the last 6 years, since 2009 to 2015. There's only $374 difference between those two, if you stack those bars. And as a result, we've held the line, but at the same time, the amount of tuition, state subsidy has gone down dramatically, while the tuition has risen in that time period. So it's a very complex issue, and I'm happy to be here to address it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. We're also very pleased to be joined by 2 UW-Oshkosh students. One thing that's often missing from these discussions is the perspective of students, so we brought some. Let's ask Austin a question. Austin, as student government leader, how do you see the university system meeting the challenge of helping students who need assistance paying for college?
Okay, so I'm going to tweak that question just a little bit because Chancellor Levitt did hit on a couple of things that the UW system's already addressing. I think that the UW system's in a particularly tough place because it kind of seems that our legislators aren't valuing higher education like college students are. And so we see budget cuts, and that really hurts students in the long run as well. But I guess I can speak more towards what individual campuses are doing, like Oshkosh in specific, and what students here are doing. So as Chancellor Levitt mentioned, we have scholarships, grants, and loans. And one of the unique scholarships that Oshkosh actually has is a Titan National Scholarship to attract students from out of state, but that scholarship, if you meet minimum requirements, you can actually get in-state tuition. So we are helping students who are from out of state even keep their prices down. We also have Student Shared Governance Group here on Oshkosh's campus that goes to lobby legislators and invites legislators to our meetings. So we can show them personal stories of the students here on campus to explain to them what student loan debt is doing to us and what we're worried about for our future. And we also have a statewide shared governance group, the one that I'm also a part of, that has gone to Madison and to DC to lobby on issues, not only for student loan debt and cost of attendance, but also job workforce readiness, because having all of this debt is putting a burden on the workforce.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, Kevin, your turn. Can you describe your experience paying for college, and what advice do you have for students who might find themselves in a similar situation to you?
All right, well, first I will start off by describing my situation. I come from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A single mother raised me. So coming into college, it was already a big difficulty paying for a lot of things like books, tuition in itself. I would say the biggest thing is to keep your GPA up, because like Austin and the Chancellor has said already, we have different scholarships, loans, and grants. Your GPA really dictates the level of scholarship or grant that you can have, and if you qualify for one in the first place. I'm lucky enough to have a GPA where I do qualify for a lot of grants that assist my tuition and scholarships as well. But like the Chancellor has mentioned already, the subsidies is what's important when it comes to scholarships and loans. So I think the biggest thing, number one, is to make sure that you keep your grades up to have the opportunity to have assistance for paying for tuition. And also, I would say one of the biggest things is staying on top of your subsidies when it comes to loans and grants.
Thank you. That actually reminds me of a student we talked to a few weeks ago here. She was a UW-Oshkosh student, and she had mentioned when we ran into her, she was actually filling out scholarship applications, and she mentioned that all these scholarships she was finding had like no applicants. Do you see that when you're applying for scholarships?
Yeah, I definitely do, definitely.
Gotcha, so apply for scholarships. Okay, so now we're gonna take some audience questions. If you have a question or a comment, please write it on a note card and hand it to Jim or Jen, who are standing in the aisles, and they'll let you know when it's your turn. I believe we have some note cards out there. We have a couple of ground rules here. Please be civil, please be succinct, and please be solutions oriented. It's fine if you have a question for the panel or if you want to make an observation or a statement, but be kind. No one in this room is responsible for student debt, but with a common purpose and working together, we can make constructive change. So my colleague, Rory Linane, is at the microphone.
Thanks, Noelle. Before we start answering your questions, we want to show you a video that we did here on campus. We interviewed several students about their own financial situations here.
Do you think the debt and working all the hours that you have to do to pay for school is worth, like, is your education worth all that work?
I mean, right now I just gotta tell myself, yeah, but I know that later on it definitely will be, because once, I mean, obviously it's different if you're going to school for like a job that's like doesn't pay that much, but if you go into like a career or something where you know that if you make it in that career, you'll make like a good amount of money, then yeah.
Hopefully.
I do. I think you have to obviously spend money to make money, and this is one of the most essential ways to spend money to make money is investing in yourself. But where others spend more at more expensive schools, that I don't really understand that. But yeah, it's definitely a problem that's with American college today. So.
Sure hope so.
I mean, it's what I want to do. So I would pay whatever I could do to get that degree, but it's still a little ridiculous on price. Like, I mean, I'll do it because that's what I want to do, but it's still like ridiculous.
Yeah. Hey UWO, we're coming at you October 8th. We're already here, so we don't need to see that part.
All right, well, send your questions. Again, raise your hand whenever you have any questions that you'd like to ask, and I'll kick things off with one of my own questions. So we have an election coming up soon, and so I'm wondering if you all had a direct line to some of these candidates out there, what would you want them to hear specifically about college affordability?
So I think the best thing that students can do, and myself included, when talking to somebody who's up for election, is to share a personal story. I invite you all to lobbying days. We don't have any set yet, but if you like the OSA Facebook page, we'll keep students up to date. So we want students to come to town hall events, to where candidates are speaking, and we want to be able to share our personal experiences, because legislators don't necessarily know that the effect that the law that they have on specific students. So sometimes it's really good to actually have those students in the office and saying, this law will affect me this way, this law will affect me that way. So it's really good to have students involved and give their experiences.
Great. Chancellor?
Yeah, I would say I'd love to see the United States Senate and House Representatives lower the interest rate on the Stafford loan program. It's ridiculously high. It's in this sort of in the 6% range. You can go, if you're a bank, you can go borrow money from the federal government for less than 1%. Yet at the same time, we're charging people 6% for getting a life-changing education. So I think that's one place I would like to start. Also, there needs to be greater predictability and stability in programs such as Pell, as well as the Perkins Loans program, which was eliminated. And that was a very important tool for people of high, or I should say low expected family contribution on the FAFSA. So those tools are not as robust as they used to be, and this is something that would really help people afford college.
Thank you. And Austin, you mentioned the importance of sharing personal stories. What have you noticed in sharing those stories with lawmakers? What has surprised them?
A lot of the time they'll actually share personal stories back with you, which is nice because, especially when lobbying in DC, it's really intimidating and you don't think that these legislators actually have gone through a similar struggle. So you do get some negative feedback depending from what office that well, when I went to college I was able to afford it, so your generation should as well. So you do get that pushback, and we train people how to respond to that in the most professional way. But we also find out who our allies are, and we see people who really can change their mind in a meeting, who just kind of need to have someone shed a little bit of light to them.
All right, thank you for sharing that. A couple of you mentioned how it can take students more than 4 years to graduate from here, and UW-Oshkosh has a higher than average time to degree than some other schools. Why do you think that is an especially big problem at Oshkosh compared to other schools, and what could be done to work on that?
I would say one of the things that seems to be the general prescription that students are told is work while you're in college. And I have perhaps a very odd suggestion, which is during the semester, don't work. I worked between the school years. I worked over the summers with my internships, and I worked before I went to college. But when you're there, these students are taking this part-time job to try to make ends meet, and it's a respectable goal. But in so doing, they take their credit load down from, say, 18 down to, say, 12. Well, it's the same cost for 18 as it is for 12. And then you push your degree out another year or so to do that. You net out negative on that. And while that's scary, you come out ahead to take on a little bit of debt while you're in college and focus on your academics and take 18 credits and get a better GPA than to try to dog it out and get out of school with less debt, but do it in 5.5 years and get a lower GPA.
We have I think there's two main reasons why our students are taking a little longer. One of them is a structural issue, which is a problem with us that we have to fix. And that is, right now, our students have to take too many credit hours to graduate. On average, our students are taking 141 credit hours to graduate from college, with typically an undergraduate degree is 120 hours, though there are some programs where it's higher. But for the most part, it's 120 hours. So if you're taking 141 hours or attempting 141 hours to finish 120, that's going to add to your time to degree. The other is where we're located, in that we have a lot of students who drop in and out of college. And the reason is we live in a place of tremendous opportunity. There's lots of jobs in this area as a result of the industry, manufacturing, of the business community in this area. People drop in and out of college frequently. They go out, make money for a while, they come back. As John was saying, I don't think that's actually the most efficient way to go to college, and it's certainly not the cheapest. The cheapest, again, is to start and finish in the fewest number of calendar months possible because of the living expenses involved. So if you need to take every interim, you need to take summer school. If you can be in every single session, you can be. Even if you have to borrow money to do it, you're money ahead if you can graduate in 4 years or less.
For me specifically, it speaks to, I would say, preparedness, and also what the Chancellor briefly mentioned, the university being prepared as well. I was a first-generation college student, so I wasn't actually prepared for what it meant to be a student. My first semester, I didn't even show up with a shower caddy. I got one at Titanites the first night here. So it just shows you that it's preparedness. The major thing that I would say is the fact that students, just because you are a student, you don't know how to be a student. So when it comes to the university preparing students and meeting them where they are, I would say the major thing is to, one of my favorite quotes is, "Access with no success is useless." And that is basically what I'm trying to say is the fact that, students, they come to college and they're not met where they are. And I believe one of the major things is to always be focused, to make sure that, like the Chancellor said, to take interims, to try to not get out of here as fast as a lot of people would say, because I am actually what's going to be a super senior my next fall. And the reason why is because, like I said, my first semester, it's all about preparedness. And that first semester is very critical. So I think that's one of the major things that students face when they are here for longer than 4 years.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And Kevin and Austin, do you have any thoughts on what John was saying about not working during your time in college? Have either of you had to work, or have friends who've had to work?
Well, I've also got a unique situation. I'll be graduating in 3 years instead of 4. But I worked, I think, 3 jobs my first semester freshman year. I maxed out on loans my first and second year. I had a scholarship, and I had worked at Culver's for 4 years to save up for school, and I blew through my entire Culver's savings my very first semester after my application of loans and everything as well. And so I get like how when you see it on paper, how it all works out, I really do. But for me, I wasn't able to like really get personal loans. I didn't know how to. No one had ever taught me. I didn't have a cosigner. I'm a first generation as well. And so working is the only way that I was able to make sure I even made the minimum payments to stay in school. So if I would have had the opportunity to take out those personal loans and to have those advantages, I definitely would have. But for some people at the end of the day, it's just not possible.
Thanks. For this next question, I'm going to ask Kim Donat to come up here. He's here from the Office of Financial Aid at UW-O. And we had someone in the audience who asked, when exactly students are required to start paying back loans?
Students need to begin repaying loans certainly once they've graduated from a university or college, 6 months after they graduate. That's a federal regulation that students begin repaying federal Stafford loans at 6 months. With the federal Perkins program, it's a need-based program. That program is actually 9 months after students graduate. Or if a student ceased to attend at least half-time, 6 credit hours or more, they need to begin repaying that student loan back. And that can put a hardship on students because they're not ready to begin repaying the loan because they don't have that credential, the job opportunities aren't as great. So there are some options, but we always encourage students to be enrolled at least half-time so we can defer those loans until they complete their degree. One question I have, thank you for all of you being on this panel. And Austin, you said you're a first-gen student, right? I've got that in common with you. And you know, I really value one's education and the opportunities. One question I have for anybody on the panel, if you could rewind the clock and start this thing all over again, what would you do differently based on what you've learned? What would you do differently this time around?
Thank you.
If I can rewind the clock and do anything differently, I honestly think it would be speaking with professors and building more personal relationships with my professors. Not to say that it is too late to do so, but that's something that I would have done from day one.
I would have started a little bit earlier than being in college because in high school I was the type of student that didn't like really have to study, and I didn't worry about my GPA. I knew I would be okay to get into a college, and I think that hurt me. I'm off a couple points of my ACT and my GPA that would have qualified me for much better scholarships. So I think I would have taken a more active role in my high school career, preparing myself for college. That's something that I tell my siblings now to do, but I didn't really have anybody to kind of be there and tell me that it was actually this important.
That makes sense. And I also wanted to ask you both about the first generation experience. Do you think there's more that the university could have done to help you with adjusting?
I would say that I was blessed to pick Oshkosh as a university because of the way that they meet first generation students. There was really no major culture shock. You know, that was all my questions were answered. There were no wrong questions that I've ever asked. I was always felt at home. So I believe that this was one of the best decisions for me being a first generation student.
Yeah, I'm incredibly happy with my choice of Oshkosh. I've been to a bunch of other UW schools now, and I wouldn't go to any other one besides Oshkosh. I had a lot of help and a lot of support my first 2 semesters here. My advisors helped me a lot. They sat down, they printed my STAR report out for me. They went through it line by line so I understood everything. We have so many events on campus that students can get involved in right away. I didn't even realize like being a first generation student was different from a lot of students' experiences, so I think Oshkosh did a really good well of helping me kind of fit the culture that we have here.
If you don't mind, I'd like to answer that question as well. While I'm very proud of the work that we do with first generation students, we could certainly do more. We could do more with a lot of our students, but certainly first gens. A theme is already emerging here that I think that institutions have to do a better job with educating students really starting back in their junior years in high school. in terms of understanding how finances work for college. I do know that a lot of students will take out loans and maybe they're not completely sure what it is that this means. What does it mean to sign a promissory note? There is actually with FAFSA, in accepting a Stafford loan, you have to take a short course, for instance, on literacy, but I don't think it's enough. And I think we should be doing so much more. We have interest in starting a student money management center on our campus that will be a place where students can go for information, they can go for short-term loans, they can go for counseling at all points in their college career. Students, as they're beginning to exit from college, really need important financial information that's just simply not provided. So it's something we certainly could do a better job with.
All right, thank you. We also have a state budget coming up, and so Chancellor, could you address what you're hoping to see in that next biennium budget for UWO?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. The UW system, the Board of Regents, has passed a proposed budget for next year that involves a number of things. First is a $42 million increase in allowing us to make sure that we're providing additional dollars for student success. In addition to that, we're also, the Regents voted for the first time last week to set tuition. It's going to be different than frozen. So they're sort of reasserting their authority to set tuition for the system. Their proposal was to have 0% increase in the first year of the biennium, followed by an increase that's tied to the rate of inflation for the second part of the biennium. So the rationale there is this, that let's say we were to raise tuition by 1, 2, or 3% in 1 year. What that would do is infuse a good deal of money into the systems and where we can begin to have more class offerings. If you can have more class offerings and students can graduate in a shorter amount of time, there's a huge cost avoidance just for that small differential in tuition. So what 1% to UW-Oshkosh is going to be $64 a year. Because the $6,400 is our tuition. So $64 a year increase is that 1%. Let's say make it 3%, it's about $192. The tuition would go up for the year, and then that would provide a whole lot of new resources for us to offer the student support in the classes the students need. Right now, with the budget reduction that we're undergoing, we're cutting our workforce by 10%. We're eliminating 10% of the employees that work at this university over a 2-year period, and that clearly is putting a real crimp, if you will, in our ability to offer the classes in the numbers that we need for our students.
Thanks. And to the students and to John, do you agree with what the Chancellor said, and is there anything else that you're hoping for to see from the state budget?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to see no more budget cuts for the UW system. That's definitely a tough time. Students don't necessarily understand exactly what that all entails until they see it happen, until they see that their classes that used to be offered aren't offered, to see that they're not able to get into the classes that they need anymore. So I definitely would love to see legislators invest in higher education, because I think that's important, not only for the students, but like for how our state's going to move forward.
All right, thank you. Oh, John.
Oh, I was going to ask a question too. I'll ask next.
Certainly, there's such a clear and statistically significant return on investment for the dollars that are put into the UW system for what comes out in the economy that it seems misguided to further take away funding. The one part that perhaps there's merit there is to give more autonomy at the university level, to take a little bit of that away from the system so that the colleges can operate their own budgets and can have a bit more say in how their budget is formed and how it works. So while I think the slash and burn on the budget side of it was perhaps a bit too much too quickly, the idea of giving autonomy so that when they see opportunities to save money or to reallocate their resources to better serve their students, that part of it I think has merit.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering with you two students, when you mentioned that you're cutting 10% of the workforce and that that shows up in the classes that are offered and the class sizes, have either of you seen that so far since the budget's been cut and since that started to happen here on campus? Have you experienced that personally, or have any of your friends experienced that personally, where you couldn't take a class because it wasn't offered, whether or not you knew, I guess, if it was tied to the budget, but...
I can't be 100% sure if it was tied to the budget, but I know my political science capstone is only offered at one time following semester. It happens to fall during an OSA meeting, so that means that if I was serving in that role and had to attend that meeting, I would have to drop my leadership role so I could take that class and graduate. I've had, like, for my minor, I've had classes canceled. I think I had 2 classes canceled for this current semester, and I had to pick stuff up during the school year. I'm not exactly sure if it's tied to the budget cut, but it kind of seems like it, and that's what people are going to point their finger towards.
Gotcha.
I could offer a brief clarification on that. We are committed to the students to put the next class they need that's required in front of them to the best of our ability. What's missing, and I think what Austin referred to, is the choice that one might have, particularly at the upper division level. We simply can't offer classes anymore with 5, 6, 7, 8 students in them. They're not cost effective. We need classes with 30, 35 students in them. So low enrollment upper division courses, which are not required, have gone away as a result. But the lower division in the core curriculum, the general education courses, we've held the line on those. Those are expensive classes to offer because the class size is so small. And so, the English classes and math classes in particular are held at a specific number so that the students have the best educational outcome. So we're paying for that. We've eliminated a lot of choice at the upper division level.
Gotcha. Thanks for the clarification.
All right, I have another question. For high school students who are looking to head to college and they're trying to think about whether a 2-year or a 4-year school might be the best fit for them, do you have any advice on how people should make those decisions, and whether going to a 2-year school and then jumping over to UW-O is also a good path for people?
I would say it depends on what the student wants to do for the rest of their lives, and if they know what they want to do, what the school offers, what programs and majors and minors and etc. Basically, sometimes it's smarter to go to a 2-year school for a specific degree rather than to prolong it and to go 4 years. Or it's smarter to go and to get your associates and then to go back for your bachelor. So, there's different ways that you can tweak the system, I would say.
There are multiple pathways to affordability that we certainly support. Going to a 2-year campus first is a wonderful way to go to college. The 2-year tuition is about 2/3 the cost of ours. If you go to a technical college, it's about half of what our tuition is. And the articulation agreements have gotten to be so good over the years that for the most part, if you leave with a technical college degree, you have a large number of the credits will transfer to the UW. Certainly, almost all of the credits, if not all the credits, would transfer from a UW college to a university. So it's a terrific way to go to college if the family finances is the issue. If you live at home and you're in a stable family environment, you save that $7,600 expenditure that you have in your budget. You save the $2,800 in personal expenses, and you're really just paying for tuition fees and books, which makes college very affordable, particularly with Pell Grants and then, of course, the loan program.
And to jump off his last point there, so to make this work, to not have to work during the semester and to, eat, I lived at home. My parents made it abundantly clear that if I didn't go to college immediately after I graduated from high school, they were not going to pay for it. And I wanted to show them, so I didn't, and they stayed true to their word. But they did relent perhaps a little in saying, but you can live here. And that was huge. It's part of the reason I went to UW-O. And I think it's a huge part of the cost that people, I don't think, are giving adequate consideration. I think everyone thinks it's not cool to go to your local college. and I think I probably thought that too. But it's also not cool to be paying off your student loans when you're 45. So, but if you can, so if you can go to the 2-year, partially because geographically they're just in more areas, and you can save just a ton of money there, it really just puts you a lot further ahead. Because like he said, a huge component of the cost of college isn't tuition. It's just the fact that you have costs. You have to live, you have food, you have rent. And if you can defer that part of it, well, that's huge.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So you mentioned you kind of felt pressured to going into college right after high school, even though you chose not to take that route. And also, Kevin, you mentioned earlier about the importance of knowing what you want to do before you're jumping into college. What do you all think about the concept of taking time off, taking a gap year? Do you think that's something that students really consider fully before going straight into college?
So in my situation, I think it's high risk, because I think the statistics on that would basically tell you that the odds that they end up going to college isn't terribly good. So it's hard to create advice for the masses. But for my situation, regardless of what my parents had thought, it was a phenomenal decision. I traveled for 2 years. I worked for the Smithsonian Institution. I saw the world. And that just grounded me a lot. And so that when I got back to school, I had an idea of what I was learning and why and how it fit into the world and a better sense of work ethic. I was not, by any stretch of the imagination, a stellar student in high school. And I excelled in college. And I think a lot of that had to do with I took enough time off to realize why I was in college and why I was doing it. Whereas I think if you go directly, a lot of people view this as just the second level of high school.
And Chancellor, from your perspective, have you seen students making that work and really coming into college more prepared if they take some time off first?
You know, I honestly can't comment on that in terms of, because I don't know who's taken time off and who hasn't taken time off. But you know, there is a maturity factor there. Lord knows I was not the level of maturity that made my first 2 years of college particularly productive. I'm glad that nobody took a close look at my transcripts when I applied for Chancellor. I did very well later on, but what I'd say is that you know, the light comes on at a different time for everyone, and it's a lot to ask for an 18-year-old to walk into a college environment where they're away from their home for the very first time in their life, and excel. I mean, to perform at a very high level. When students do that, and a lot do, I'm in awe that people can do that, because I certainly could not. There were a lot of students who couldn't either, and they struggle. You know, it's that first time you take a calculus test and you get a 35, and most students have never seen a 35 in their life. You know, what is this number? It doesn't make any sense. And so there's a big adjustment. So one could argue a gap year could help in terms of the maturity, that people can come in a little bit more focused. Instead of a gap year, you know, what you could do is go to, like I say, go to the 2-year college. Go to one of the UW colleges for a year or two, and you know, you could, again, the price point is lower if you have a stable living situation, which is saying a lot, because not everybody does. If you have a stable living situation, it really is more affordable to go, and then you can gain some experience. And when you go away to college, you come to a campus like UW-Oshkosh. We'd love to have you, by the way. If you come here, then you're going to perform much better because you're much more acclimated.
And as far as when you're in college and deciding what to study, we've heard had a lot of comments on our stories about you know, students choosing worthless degrees in philosophy, et cetera, that they'll never be able to make any money on. You know, what do you think about the ideas of pursuing what you're really interested in versus really thinking ahead and thinking about exactly what job you're going to be able to get in whatever you study? How do you kind of balance those concerns?
Yeah, coming from a philosophy minor. So I guess like my minor in philosophy, some might say useless, and I don't necessarily know what I would like do with it besides go to graduate school. But I've known for, you know, a very long time that I wanted to go to law school. So then researching what what you need to get into law school, I found out that philosophy majors score the highest on the LSAT. So I picked philosophy because, not because it would be useless, because it actually helps me score in some of the higher sections of the harder part of the LSAT exam. So I think it really depends what students want to do with their future. I don't think a liberal arts degree or studying, a liberal studies kind of curriculum, it's going to actually hurt anybody in the long run. You might not be able to get like the STEM jobs with it because you're not, specifically focused in science, technology, engineering and math. But I think the skills you learn in those classes are definitely going to apply to the real world.
I have to answer this. There is no such thing as a worthless college degree, period. All college degrees have great value. They are a certification that you know how to learn. You know how to critically think. You know how to communicate. You know how to debate. You know how to work and thrive in diversity. That's what a college degree tells you. As a matter of fact, those are exactly the same skills that employers want when they hire people. Is they want leaders. They want people who have those kinds of skills. And there are other ways that you can get them, but by far the most common, most efficient way to do that is to get a college degree where a liberal education is a big part of that. People used to pick on art history and philosophy, and philosophy was mentioned tonight, which I think that's probably weird to say, because when I'm out in crowds, sometimes they pick on other majors, which I find oddly disturbing. Women's studies, multiculturalism, things like that are now also being heralded as useless degrees, which, what are we saying here, folks? So, I think we have to, all degrees have merit, all degrees have value, and as a matter of fact, philosophy, because President Obama fell into this trap and used philosophy as an example, and art history also was an example, and was shown that philosophy majors make a good living. Later on, they end up getting jobs in all walks of life, and they make good living. You have to remember that the unemployment rate for people who have a four-year college degree is minuscule right now. It's like 1%. It's minuscule. And even at the height of the recession, it never got above a couple of percent. It really was quite low. So it's the best way to assure economic security for your future is to have an undergraduate, hopefully a graduate degree as well.
All right, thank you.
Kind of on that, the other part of that question was the argument between going to school for what you love versus what you're good at and what you're going to make money at. Do any of you have any thoughts on that argument? I mean, I know what my answer would be when someone asks, well, why don't you go, journalists don't make any money, why don't you go for something that you make a lot of money at? I know what I would answer, but I'm curious, do any of you have any thoughts on that argument of what you love versus what makes money?
Me specifically, before I came to college, I wanted to be an architect. Never have been good at math. So I'm a criminal justice major now. I'm passionate about investigating and things of that nature. So that's why I chose criminal justice. But had math been my friend, I think it would have been architect.
I would say that, and I guess, so I went to college as a sociology major when I started. And it's a long story, but I ended up as an accounting and finance major. And I promise you, I didn't do it because I expected to make more money. I did it because a phenomenal professor lent me the book, The Essays of Warren Buffett. And it was basically a book that described socioeconomics and how crowd psychology affects markets. And I thought it was fascinating. And so I switched because, in the most unlikely scenario, because I saw my passion and the thing that I could spend the rest of my life doing in accounting and finance as it related to sociology. And I would say that there's more to it when you're just looking at the economic side of it. There's certainly, there's probably some majors that just predispose you for a higher starting salary. But your work is going to fill up a large part of your life. And boy, would it be a depressing life to work for that entire time and not enjoy what you do. If you don't love what you're doing, then it's just not going to be a very good life. So I think that, I don't know if you can assign a monetary value to that, but if your goal here is to be happy, if your goal is to live a good life, then I think that there's factors that aren't being properly considered when people say, well, why didn't you choose one that makes more money?
Gotcha, thanks. Well, that's about all the time we have for questions, I think, unless you had one more, Rory.
Sure. No.
Did you? Okay.
That's great.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions. We want to finish this evening with some closing thoughts. Excuse me, I lost my place. Remember that what we're taking here we'll be using in our Degrees of Debt series, and the final installment in March will include a series of recommendations on making college more affordable. So, panelists, I want to ask you, what are your top takeaways from tonight?
My top takeaway would be to really pay attention to all of your finances in college and to hone in on making sure that your studies are above par, and because that's going to create a lot of different avenues for you in the future here as a student.
Yeah, I guess something that I can take away from this event is that struggles that I'm going through and other college students are going through seem to be something that's across the country, and I definitely have faith in our students' future, that we're going to be able to push through something like this, and that even if we take on what we see as crazy amounts of debt, we're going to be able to apply the skills we've gained at our colleges to still be successful.
I would say I take away that I think an increased urgency for the need for education in terms of educating people in their finances. And I think that would be a big way to help. I'm very grateful to the legislature in terms of their consideration of not having a cut in this year. I think that we've heard loud and clear from the taxpayers of this state, as well as the legislature and the governor, about making certain reforms within our educational system, higher educational system, to be more efficient and effective, and I think we've done that over the last 2 years, and we're ready to roll up our sleeves and work with our legislative friends to get the ball moving to make college more affordable for all the students.
And I'm encouraged that we're having this discussion. I think that there's a lot of issues facing the country, and oftentimes we just all kind of mention that it's an issue and then we go on with our day. But the fact that we're taking the time to get together and discuss the issue and discuss potential solutions gives me hope that we'll find answers.
Thank you, panelists, and thanks again for being here with us this evening. Now we want to hear from you. We set a video booth up outside the room, it's right around the corner on the left, where you can record a video sharing your own story or a statement about student debt. And you can also send submissions to Rory, and details about that are on the screen. So thank you all again for being here with us, and good night.